Hey there everyone, and welcome back to another reaction video. Today we'll be reacting to SCP-2006. Too spooky. Anyway, I think I did a reaction quite a while ago on this SCP, or at least I think recently, because I do remember this having reaction video on this SCP, but you know, the likelihood that that's on my old channel is also pretty high. Anyway, let's press play and see what's gonna happen, shall we?
Viewer discretion is advised. It was a house. It was dark, in shambles, and covered in graffiti. The house seemed to pull it in, almost as if invisible tentacles were dragging it closer and closer to the door.
And
Hello,
what
everybody.
else
I'm
do
TheRubber.
those tentacles
Today,
do?
we bring you SCP
Wink,
Foundation
wink.
Keter Class Object SCP-2006. SCP-2006 is an anomalous spherical entity that measures roughly 50 centimeters in diameter in its default state. 2006 possesses the ability to change its appearance and voice to any form that it desires. Currently, 2006 has demonstrated a fondness for taking the form of various entities and villains from a number of horror and science fiction movies that it has seen prior to the transformation.
Alien.
The most
What?
common form that
No,
2006
nothing from the Grudge of the
embraces
Ring?
is that of
Boo.
Roman from the 1953 movie Robot Monster. SCP-2006 is still capable of speaking even when it possesses the form of an entity that is normally unable to speak.
Oh boy.
2006's goal is to evoke feelings of fear and horror in humans. To do that, 2006 will generally attempt to startle or scare any individual it comes into contact
Now that
with.
just reminds me
But
of
after doing so, it will become
Captain
affable
Marvel.
and friendly.
Or Miss
SCP-2006
Marvel or
is
whatever.
not good at distinguishing between the various different types of stimuli that can cause fear to humans. Hence, it's constantly searching for new methods in which to accomplish its goal. This poor
Oh, boy.
recognition extends to recognition of emotions in humans, as 2006 is incapable of distinguishing between subtle differences in emotion that otherwise would be much more obvious to a human.
Oh,
With
do
this
you
nature,
now?
some SCP personnel have been questioning why SCP-2006 is classified as a Keter entity. So here's an explanation from Site-118 Director Dr. Randall Owings. Although SCP-2006 is not a regenerating super lizard, it does possess the same level of danger as any other Keter that the Foundation has contained.
True.
Imagine what would happen if SCP-2006 found out what really scared people. Imagine if it saw the horror and fear of war, or the concepts of paranoia or phobias common to each and every human being. Imagine if it found the true horror of a nuclear holocaust, or
Ooh.
an XK-class scenario.
Aye.
Now, couple that with an entity that possesses shape-shifting abilities with no known limits, and you'll understand why it's classified as Keter.
True.
Currently, SCP-2006 is contained at Site-118 in an airtight containment cell. However, it once broke out of its containment and ventured out into a forest.
Uh-oh.
2006 trudged through the thick forest, at first annoyed by the mud because it dirtied its clean fur. Then it realized that the mud would only make it seem creepier and scarier than before. It didn't bother dusting it off after this thought. After a few hours, the fearsome beast found itself on solid ground, a sidewalk.
Uh-oh.
2006 was delighted. A sidewalk always led to houses, and houses always led to chances of scaring the living daylights out of people. After a moment or two of walking, it had found a group of kids.
That's not gonna
They
work,
all
is
wore
it?
masks and different
Great, it
outfits.
broke out at Halloween.
Slowly, it crept
Great.
up behind them. Boo! The kid in front of him dropped a bag that they had been holding, numerous sweets and confections spilling out. The kid stepped forwards a bit, startled, before staring back at the monster. The child's
You
face was painted a
motherfucker!
pale white, with sharp plastic fangs to match. Come on, man, you made me drop my candy. The consequence of your candy dropping bears
Oh,
no match to
boy.
my power. Be afraid, human.
Yeah.
2006 screamed back, waving its hands in the air and jumping up and down.
Boo.
Do you know this guy? Questioned another child wearing a Spider-Man costume. I have no clue. I suppose this is why they tell you about stranger danger. The whole group
Probably.
laughed. Was I not scary, children? All I want is to be scary. If that's your job, then you suck at it. Come on, guys. Let's get out of here before this guy eats our brains. The kids ran away.
And then he's gonna eat their brain.
Amongst themselves. 2006 was devastated. My whole life is a lie. What will it take to be scary again?
Honestly, once this guy figures out that the SCP Foundation is pretty much just you know, lying to him about that thing, about being scary and all that, yeah, he's probably gonna be pissed.
Almost like magic, it heard the words "trick or treat" sound from the group of kids it had attempted to terrorize. It looked down the sidewalk and saw them wait in front of a door, tapping their toes while checking their watches. Eventually, an old woman emerged from the door. Well, hello, children. Oh my goodness. Aren't you the scariest vampire I ever did see? To SCP-2006, this sounded like genuine fear. It seemed that the scariest of creatures weren't monstrous beasts, but small creatures, like those children. So SCP-2006
This isn't gonna end well, is it?
It transformed into a small, pale humanoid that resembled a human child. There it stood, completely naked, blood dripping from the mouth with pointed ears, sunken eyes, and sharp
At least
claws
it's
and
not
teeth.
glowing.
It jumped up and down with excitement before getting on all fours and quickly crawling to the house the kids were at. The crawling creep knocked on the door and hung from above the doorframe. The woman from before came out. Hello? Anyone there? Prepare to face the wrath of demons, puny mortal. Screamed SCP-2006.
And she dies of a
jumping
heart
out in front
attack.
the woman
She dies of a
before
heart
giving off
attack.
a high-pitched screech. The old woman fainted in fright, falling back into the house. There was no response from the lady. Ha! Frozen in fear, aren't you? There was still no response.
She's dead.
I'm just gonna go on to the next house, all right? Have a nice day, ma'am. It left the house, the lady still unmoving.
I think she
It went
dead.
from door to door, scaring each and everyone in the neighborhood. It finally got to live out its life purpose. Its only
He's so
purpose,
happy about
to scare
it.
as many people as possible, in the best way possible. Eventually, it sat down on a tree branch to take a break. It had been scaring people for more than 4 hours, and had finally grown tired. Just as it was about to lay down and fall asleep, something caught the corner of its eye. It was a house. It was dark, in shambles, and covered in graffiti. 2006 was drawn to it, yet at the same time, unnerved by it. The house seemed to pull it in, almost as if invisible tentacles were dragging it closer and closer to the door. 2006 had no physical reason to be afraid because there wasn't anything that could physically harm it. Yet, it could sense something was wrong. Something was utterly terrifying about the house.
Wonder
2006
why.
thought of the word for it. Dread, perhaps? Maybe unknowing. Unknown. The fear of the unknown. The knowledge of uncertainty. The acknowledgement that anything may happen.
And thus
In this
the
house,
world ended.
There was no certainty. No knowing of what may happen. It was filled and filled and filled with unknown. And SCP-2006 was afraid. When 2006 walked out of the house hours later, a number of highly armed soldiers, researchers, and field agents have already stand by outside and waiting for it, ready to forcefully contain it. Yet SCP-2006 simply just kept walking. Its form changed back to Roman, and it didn't say a word. It walked into the temporary containment truck along with a number of confused MTF members. Their guns still
Alright,
pointed
what
at the
the
thing at
fuck's
all
going
times,
on here?
and was driven back to Site 118, eventually contained once again in its cell. As the sun rose on Site 118, this time without a missing anomaly, Site Director Owings and Researcher Loof got together for a meeting. So Loof, any progress in 2006? Sir, all it does is sit in the corner of the cell. It doesn't speak, It doesn't move. It won't do anything. In the last 3 hours, we've poked it with sticks, we've played frequencies in the cell that would drive any man mad, and we've shown it numerous bad sci-fi flicks. Nothing can get it to move. I know it has been difficult, but we gotta keep trying.
Meh.
Sir, with all due respect, we know SCP-2006 learned something last night. It has evolved, not in the physical, but in the mental sense. It knows that any monster, deity, or what have you can and will become stale.
Anubis.
But from what I can guess, it knows that primal fear never evolves. Sir, have you ever seen The Shining? Most certainly.
No,
yes.
not really.
You know that scene where Wendy is going through Jack's papers, all saying the same thing, and Jack is slowly creeping up on her? Yes. Sir, 2006 knows suspense. Lying in the corner, it has become Jack, and we're all Wendy. He knows what he's going to do. He's slowly
Alright,
creeping
that's
up on
funny.
us, while we all scramble around cluelessly and wait. We have no idea what he's going to do. But with all this tension being built up, we know that he needs to release it at some point. We've all feared he'd become a nuclear holocaust, or a large-scale genocide, or something else horrible. But we've never feared that he'd become horror itself. There was a
Not gonna lie, but now that I think about it, if they're so afraid of him turning into like a world-ending scenario, why not just tell him, hey, if you like scaring people so much, if you there are ways of scaring people that you can only scare them once, you know? And then they're dead. Or you just maybe explain the concept of death and say, hey, if you scare them with this sort of thing, they'll die. And you won't be able to scare them anymore. Or soon we'll no longer have anyone to scare. But then again, you do have to first show it like guns, world wars, and nukes.
tense silence in the meeting room.
Yeah.
Director Owings broke it. Prepare the site for anything. The tension will release any moment. Remember to check out my...
Wait, what? They said prepare the site for anything? So attack of hentai monsters is probably something they'd want to prepare for. Not gonna lie, if I would have the opportunity, I would totally, and I mean totally, show this SCP a crap ton of hentai and say, hey, if you turn into this monster, you can particularly scare women. And just let them loose on the world. Or maybe just specifically in China or Japan. I mean, in China there certain people are not that fair. So, guess you can say that would be revenge. Anyway, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. Sorry for me rambling on. And I will see you guys in the next episode of whatever I'll be making. So, yeah. See you in the next video, guys. Bye.